Oh, Chris,
Good morning.
I have a very deep question that is spurred by reading what you've been writing about. And it, what's coming up for me is this question of can we even sustain the systems that we're currently part of?
Wow, where to start? Um, I feel like we're in this kind of twilight zone between uh, maybe, yeah, between day and night or between night and day. I don't know which it is.
Mhm.
We're in a twilight zone. Um, and systems systems of one world, systems of one order are are trundling along as if nothing's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but they feel very fragile, like uh, food systems
Mm-hmm.
feel like, the climate could break them at any point, or and we've seen with the Iran war, the war on Iran, that a choke point, there are choke points in the system, that can cause disruptions. Uh, so it feels like, yeah, there's a fragility underneath the surface. Uh, so there's that going on for me, I think. Um, then what else? The very human systems, the systems of kind of relationships with kind of friends and neighbors and communities they feel quite stable to me at the moment. Although there are fractures appearing, with cons concerns amongst some people about immigration, and that causes a
Mm.
fault line within those systems.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Oh, that is very much felt, especially here in the Netherlands, where the rhetoric of the Netherlands is so small and it's getting to be too many people coming in.
mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And maybe that just points towards the fragility of other, social security systems and health systems, and people are worried about those things, and it becomes projected upon migration instead of. Uh, um, and I think the deeper we get into kind of the unfolding of the current order, the further we get into that, the more those systems, the cracks will start to appear in those systems. Um, and I guess my question back is, how do we build new systems to replace the ones that are falling apart? And can we do that quickly enough uh, to avoid major harm?
Mm. Yeah, the image that is coming out for me is like we're simultaneously doing the composting and building, right? Of like we're composting
Mhm.
dominant systems that are very much trauma-led systems,
Uh-huh.
right? That we know already is not something that we should even sustain because it does not, yeah, it does not work for most
Mm.
of us.
Yeah.
And so it's the, like how do we hold that and then hold the, oh, and we need to create the regenerative systems in a, like, in the pacing that is necessary,
Mm.
right? So there's also a bit of a, can we get our acts together as quickly as possible?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the time frame I've given myself is 20 years. So I think the kind of the unfolding of the old order, I think we're in it. And I think it's from a guy, a systems analyst who is very influential on me is Emmanuel Wallerstein, who's now dead, American scholar. And we had an email exchange about this, and I was so chuffed that he actually even replied to my email. I was like, this guy, he must be so busy, and yet he's replied. And he said he thinks he's studied the world system, for how it developed over 500 years, and he thought it was in the 2040s that it was really gonna things are really gonna collapse in on
Mm.
themselves. So I've given myself that as a time scale. So what can we do in 20 years? How
Mhm.
much can we develop the new systems in that time uh, to get us through? So there's that, and it's interesting that you invoke, trauma, that you bring that into the conversation because I think um, it's interesting. So I've seen it in a number of places, like systemically. So I was reading again some of the research about why people vote for authoritarian leaders. And
Mm.
there's very strong research that if you are brought up in a patriarchal, male-dominated family where violence is either used or threatened, then you're far more likely to vote for
Yes.
an authoritarian leader. And I can't remember who it was who said, show me how the children are raised, and I'll predict the governmental system of 20 years time. And it's so that it's the trauma there within the system, and then I've seen the trauma. Well, you used the phrase to me once, activism as a trauma response, and I've definitely seen that. I've seen
Yes.
how fear and trauma and play out within
Yeah.
oppositional movements as well, or movements for the creation of the
Yes.
new. So it's kind of it is a, and it does feel to me like it's one of the factors that will dictate the pace at which we can make the changes we need to,
Yeah.
is
Oh,
how much trauma feeds in to the process overall. Or sorry, how uh, how much
healing.
our ability to heal,
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
get us through that. Yeah.
Well, this is interesting what you were sharing about how, you know, how very dominant families create that in a bigger scale, right? And if we go back to nervous system, right? If we go
Mhm.
back to neuroscience and neurobiology, we know that how our nervous system is wired dictates our felt sense of safety and threats, right? And if your nervous system has been repeatedly wired towards, oh, someone who's authoritarian is safe, then any change outside of that is seen as threats. And so no wonder we would most likely opt for that.
Mm,
Right. So this is where the circle of oppression happens, because the rewiring of the nervous system is not attended to.
mm, mm,
And in a lot of ways, that's also why when we were talking about activists, and how they arrive from their, the movements and the causes that they want to support is coming in from that, again, wounded cells, right? So the question of oh, how can we arrive at that more from a healed or healing centered
Mm.
perspective so that we're not coming into activism from a place of woundedness, but rather from a place of wisdom and from a place of fullness and wholeness.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think this is where the what you were saying of how much of what we can metabolize, how much we can heal supports that building of the new systems.
Yeah.
Because if I go back to how I've seen it in the Philippines, like I was so um amazed in the 1980s when we had the Philippine revolution, People's Power Revolution, right?
Yeah.
One of the most peaceful revolutions ever to oust a dictator. And how much of the pain that I had seeing, how many decades later, his son is in power as our president.
Mm.
And that is the cycle, right? That is the
Mm.
cycle that we're talking about. And if we cannot break that cycle,
Mm.
whatever systems that we create would just feed into these patterns.
Mm.
And so
Mm.
what you were mentioning about how much of it can we uh you know put in a space of healing and metabolizing and harvesting tells us how much of it can we create the new systems.
Mm.
And so yeah, there is for me there is a grief and there's a curiosity and also hope of I see it with my kids. I see it with the next generations, how much they're in this space of knowing their boundaries. Like boundary was not something that we were taught growing up. So seeing the next generation grow up and do that is so amazing, right? So I see that there's this budding practices that are already ongoing.
Mm.
And I'm coming back to what you said a while ago within that 20-year framework of like what then are the capacities that we need to deepen
Mm.
for us to be able to get there.
Mm. 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 It's it's interesting about the Philippines because that was the era when I started my kind of activism, and I remember interviewing people from the Philippines about kind of community organizing, and like it was so inspirational. The kind of just how kind of grassroots it was and how embedded it was and how peaceful it was. And so, yeah, it's
Mhm.
nice to kind of remember about that again. And then, yeah, to see that, oh, there are cycles or, yeah, that come back around. Um, and so while you were talking, I was wondering about if there's a fractal thing. Like, does the human species have a nervous system? You know, so
Mm.
and if it does, I don't know whether it does, but it just felt like an interesting thought experiment. If it does, then this narrative of fear around the future, the narrative of fear of kind of climate emergency or kind of societal collapse doesn't help co-regulation, does it?
No, no. We're in
Um,
a collectively dysregulated
yeah, 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 yeah,
state.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. So our responses are not from a regulated position; they're from a triggered position, state. So, what would be the equivalent, communal practices to regulate the communal or the species nervous system?
Mm. I go back to the word that I personally prefer,
Ah, okay.
and that is co-attunement,
Ah, okay.
right? So
Yeah, yeah.
um in this space, what we need is not another person who's regulated. So what we need is somebody who's also attuned.
Uh-huh.
And so how can we
Yeah.
co-attune? And in Filipino, that's the practice of pakikiramdam. Like how can we deeply sense what's happening within, what's happening in between, what's happening in the depths of the relationships of and also what's happening that's emerging, right? So for me, this co-attunement is a way for us to understand that there would always be dysregulated states,
Mm.
right? So it's not, utopia is not possible, because dysregulated states are part of who we are, as a
Mm.
species. But how do we go back to calibration? And I think that's what we lost somehow, of like, how do we go back to calibration?
Mm. So are you saying that the process of kind of witnessing or presence or so when I think of attunement, what do I think of? I think of when I'm with my grandchildren is what I think of.
Mm,
So it's kind of like the presence of being with a baby, or the kind of the that and I don't know I don't quite know what I'm doing. I'm giving them my full attention.
yeah.
I'm giving them there's something going on energetically. So I feel like I need to open my heart or my energy to kind of to because they're a child, to envelope them.
Mm,
And I don't know what that is with other human beings to merge our energies somehow or connect our energies somehow.
yeah.
Uh, is there what
Yeah.
else is attunement?
Yeah. So for me, when you've already expressed that in terms of the quality of presence,
Uh-huh.
right? So the quality of presence that allows us to understand what's going on inside of me in the first place. What's going on with the other in the first place, and then what's going on between us in the first place, right? So it really is like like an accordion of when we're talking about co-attuning is we're finding which are the spaces that we'd want to really hone in on, and then put our intentionality and presence and attention and focus to,
Mm,
that would allow us to um that would allow us to have more understanding of what's there in that present moment.
mm, mm. So one kind of stopping off point on the road map to the next world. One landmark is is this kind of co-attunement
Yeah, yeah.
and
And
say
I
the
and
word.
I would even go to start with attuning with ourselves. Like that
Uh,
is so, I would say that's one of the areas that's so far off removed in our practice of attuning with ourselves. Especially I often refer to fawning, that people pleasing,
uh-huh,
as one of the colonial responses.
uh-huh,
Because in a
uh-huh.
society where you needed to people please to survive, that becomes the culture.
Yeah.
And I go back to Resma Menacom's words around um, what's this? The trauma decontextualized in a person over time looks like personality. Trauma decontextualized in a family over time looks like family traits, and then trauma decontextualized over time in people looks like culture.
Yeah.
And this is what we do, right? When we're talking about um, co-attunement, oftentimes there are patterns of behaviors that are already there, and if we're not attuning to it, we just keep on repeating those patterns.
Yeah. 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 This is one thing that I find a little bit difficult with when you start a meeting with a check-in. It's because to really do it, to really kind of tune into where am I right now, it's kind of quite a subtle thing.
Yes.
It takes a moment, and it's very easy to say, "Oh, I'm fine," or "Oh, this is what happened over the weekend," which
Hmm.
is, that's context, so it's great, but it's like how are you? How am I really? Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay. Let me take a moment here.
Oh,
Uh, you
I
know.
I did an experiment on this, Chris.
Uh-huh.
A year long experiment on uh understanding how to check in with myself.
Uh-huh.
I remember that because that was the early times when I was doing nonviolent communication. And in nonviolent communication, there's always the checking in, or like,
Yeah.
check in with yourself. And I just realized, and I was 37 at that time. And I realized I didn't know how to do check-ins.
Mm.
And then that was also the time that I got my first diagnosis of breast cancer. So even more that I'm like, okay, if somebody asks me how I am, if I don't know myself, then how would other people know? Right. So for me, it was just like, I need to check, understand how to check in with myself.
Mm.
And I did that. I had the 9 o'clock, 12 noon, 6
Oh.
p.m. alarm.
Huh.
And I did that for a year. Every time that alarm comes, I would stop, give myself a moment, ask myself, how are you feeling? What is it that you need? And just have clarity for myself on that. And it was so powerful. It's such a powerful practice of
Mm.
really fine tuning the gradients of
Yeah.
not just saying fine or okay.
Yeah. 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 And I find I find I get yeah. I think I'm much better at this than, I have been in the past, but I also find it helps when I get, some feedback. So I kind of like my partner is very good at saying, you're starting to sound a bit angry. I'm like,
The
oh, okay,
mirroring.
okay, because I can feel it, but just to kind of
Yeah.
to have somebody whose judgment you respect, just kind of saying, oh.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
So yeah, and then sorry, and then as you were talking, I was thinking, okay, so like there's kind of attunement to myself, then there's attunement to others who I'm in the proximity of, and then maybe there's attunement to the wider
yeah. The bigger
kind of
field.
human system at
Yeah.
different kind of scales. And then there's the kind of, because we've touched on this in our conversations in the past, haven't we? Our attunement to the kind of the more than human
Yes. More than
world as
human.
well. So
Really.
what are we, are we attuned, to what degree are we attuned with that? Um, and then I want to say kind of cosmic,
Yes.
as
The
well.
spirits.
And that, yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh, yeah. Uh, So that.
So the gesture that you made a while ago in referring to being with your grandchildren, that
Uh-huh.
opening of the hearts. That's the gesture that I see when we're talking about this expansion of attunement. Like
Okay.
there's an expansion of opening the hearts to not just oneself, but to the bigger field.
Yeah, yeah. So if we circle back round to where we started about kind of how ready are we to build the systems that we need, or what's the time scale over which we need to build those systems. There's a kind of a sense of that this kind of attunement to self, to others, to planet, to cosmos, that the the more of that there is,
Yeah.
the better. Is that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think the positive thing about framing things like that and having a not too short a time scale. I don't know if 20, I don't know if 20 years is enough, but having 20 years as a time scale is that
So it's
it,
the next generation already, right?
well, yeah, right. Okay. And then
But
we
this
could,
is
yeah,
this is also what is interesting in light of this conversation around trauma. Of like, yes, trauma resides in generations, right? So
yeah,
epigenetically, we know it is a big factor. And then we're also seeing when we're talking about the mitochondrial DNA, right? So what gets passed on is indeed that, right? The ways that we contract, the ways that we expand, the ways that we use our energy, that's forming part of our foundational. And so, yes, we do carry a lot of this, traumatic experiences. But what I'm leaning towards to is healing happens only in one generation.
uh-huh,
So the healing that I do becomes the next ways in which that will be experienced by the next generation.
right,
And I see
right,
that already with my kids.
yeah,
They knew how to one one concrete example was ever since we've started teaching them how to read the room, and if you're sensing that there's something in the room, voice it out in terms of what will be needed. And
mm,
so we've had the practice of doing family conferences, and in a family conferences you bring in whatever it is that you want to bring in. And so they did, we did that ever since the kids were like 6 and 7. And there was one incident where there was some tension that's happening between me and my husband in how we're communicating.
uh-huh,
And we just came in outside and came in the door, and we were in the living room, all four of us. Our daughter was 9 and our son was 8. And our daughter said, Mama, Papa, if you keep on what's this? If you keep on talking like that, why don't you go to the kitchen so you can talk it out there, and me and my brother can can play in the living room without your energy. A 9-year old.
right,
But she pointed it out, right? She
yeah, yeah,
sensed into
yeah,
there's something here that's not conducive for us.
yeah,
And there's something here that the two of you need to discuss among yourselves.
mm, mm,
And this for me is like this is the practice, right? This is the practice of attunement,
yeah,
of how can we support each other, like the mirroring that your wife was already telling you, like, oh, I'm noticing that you're angry, I'm noticing
yeah,
you're frustrated.
yeah, yeah. And so that makes me think that this kind of, if we call it healing, that this kind of or co-attunement of the human, the species, co-attunement of the species nervous system, uh, could could be a like a virtuous kind of
Yes.
spiral. You know, it can
Yes,
build.
an expanding spiral, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah.
Even have an example of that with our dog.
Okay.
So for those who might say, oh, it's not just the human to human, right? Uh, for quite some time, I was noticing that our dog has a different Peter pattern when she's walking, and what she needs when she's walking
Uh-huh.
differently. Again, being highly sensitive, you get attuned to that, right? To the noise, to gestures, to sounds. And so I keep on telling my husband and our kids, this was a time when she was new to us. It's like, you need to tune into how she's Peter patterning, because there's a difference in her energy when she's Peter patterning. And at first they were just like, hear it. And we had a conversation with a dog whisperer. And we ask questions about our dog's personality and what she needs and things like that. And so in that conversation, we had, see, I told you, this is what she was telling. And so the next few days after that conversation, they started to tuning into it.
Uh-huh.
And now they know as well. Yeah, they now was like, oh, she's nervous. Oh,
Uh-huh.
she wants to go outside. Oh, she wants some attention. You know, it's like they're now the ones doing that. But it's so fascinating to just, yeah, again, to a relational other, right? Of like, how do you attune to a relational other?
Yeah. Yeah. And if I kind of extrapolate that out, so there is a human ability to sense both kind of very real things and energetic things about what the more than human system
Yeah,
needs, what different, what different animals need, what plants need,
yeah.
what the land
But
needs,
forests do that,
what the climate needs. Uh-huh.
right? Forests do that as well.
Yeah,
Trees do that so
yeah,
beautifully with each
yeah,
other.
yeah. So the whole of the system knows, or senses, or different
Yeah.
parts of the system can sense different things about different parts of the system, and humans get. And I think that's. I mean, I guess we're nearing our time now, but it feels like that's one thing that is um, intrinsic to what human beings are, is that we can sense a lot of the system when we attune to it. We have the ability to sense. I think I would posit, when we're really attuned, we have the system.
Yeah.
We have the ability to sense the whole system.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm.
Mm.
So there is an awareness gap that we're trying to fill
Yeah.
in terms of how do we practice that attunement.
Yeah. Yeah. How do we practice that and what do we do with it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Beautiful. What a great place to finish.
yes. Thank you for this conversation, Chris.
Yeah, thank you.
Looking forward to the next one.
Yeah. All right.